Okay, we've got a recorder issue. I'm gonna reboot and see if that helps. It's right next to Gary in that couch. There should be another recorder. Yeah, it's fine. No bin ballot operation. So who can run? There should be a third one.
I have the executive session link.
I don't see it. Maybe this, who has the executive session? I don't know. Is it worked? That's good. I'm having both of that over there, so I don't inadvertently.
Here we go. This one's powering on. Batteries are just dead.
I'll phone it. So Erin gets back. So I'm going to hold on to that. I'll mail the batteries in these other ones, but it's still showing on that other one that it's invalid. Turn the recorder on. It is 4:05 p.m. This is the Bluff Town Council regular meeting session, or actually it's the work session. Today is February 11th, 2025. Roll call.
Linda Sosa.
Britt, Hornsby.
Jennifer Davila.
Ann Leppanen.
Erin Nelson serving as town manager.
Luanne Cook is excused. So number one is a discussion of the Bluff Airport lease and how airport maintenance and development fit into the capital improvements plan. So we received a lease from the BLM, and I believe it is for 5 years. The rate increased, which didn't surprise me. And we've already paid for the 2025 fiscal year. And the rent will be $1,368 starting with 2026. And that was based on the appraisal that was done probably a good year ago. It took a while for the appraiser to get everything together. So we need to just, I think we need to discuss like how that capital improvement plan works going forward, because there's a proposed maintenance with the FAA for, can't recall.
So we have a number of potential projects coming up. So Javiation, who is our engineer for the airport, is projecting a $1.9 million project in 2029, which would include rehabilitation of the runway, taxiway connector, apron construction, and like a turnaround. And so for each of these, we're required to match 10%. So the state does 90% and we do 10. So we've got that there in 2029, and then in 2033, they're projecting a crack ceiling project totaling $250,000. So for that span, and I mean, what we did see on the previous airport project is that the rates were slightly more than what was estimated. So this is not like set in stone, but we do have $250,000 projected local match between those two projects. We also have you can kind of see here. So the ones that we did in the past year bled over into this last fiscal year. So those are here in 2023 and 2024. And here's these 2029 and 2033 with just some the breakdown of the allocation.
So one of the things that I think is important we think about before we sign a 5-year lease is whether the airport is something that we can fiscally handle the way that it is. And Britt and I met with Jake Palma on December 16th, and we talked about whether there were options, and there would be another option in addition to just not signing a lease of this nature, and that would be, my mind is drawing a blank on the phrase, but you'd go to no FAA requirements, and it would just be used as an airstrip. It would just be, people could continue to use it. We'd sign a different type of agreement with the BLM, and there is a specialist who works on these types of situations. So I was thinking it might be a good idea in order for all of the council to ask questions, to invite her to the next meeting or so that we can ask those questions directly, like, what does this look like? But the need to continue, as in other airstrips that I don't have someone like a Jim. Do you remember the names? I can, let me just verify. And we do get, a fair amount of funding for these kinds of maintenance and repairs. But given everything that we have coming up with the other projects, it seems like we should have a bigger discussion before we vote to approve it. I didn't bring this with me, but the basic difference is that it's not, you don't have the repair requirements that are necessary with the FCC.
Is there a document or is there a place that we can go to identify the differences between the two?
They didn't cite to it, but I imagine that the person that we met with in Jake's office could help us out with that and provide it. Because it was so close to the holidays, I completely spaced on it. And until the lease came in, I didn't think to bring it back and talk about it. But I do think it would be good to have the person at the BLM manages these come into a meeting and take some questions.
Do you think in doing something like that, not having an active lease, that would preclude us from having any matching funds available? I mean, because if repairs are needed and it's unusable if it's not in good repair and need to repair it anyways, are we then missing out on a funding source that we might get if we had signed a lease?
Speculating based on all my previous conversations with yes, we wouldn't be entitled to those kinds of grants because they're also, they're supported by the government for federal and state funding. And, the other question would be if we get to 2028 and the council feels they can't make the match, then I suppose you could talk with BLM about breaking these and how easy that is. But that might be the other option, or to ask to have a lesser length lease than 5-year lease, like do a 2-year lease or a 3-year lease and see where the town is at that point.
And in the worst case scenario, we put five grand, you said, but we usually put it back the end of the wall is about 22 to 25,000.
Not to discredit all the work that our airport manager has done to this point, is this something that we can gather his input on? Can I meet with him to kind of talk through where he sees the pros and the cons? I know he's been very close to this project for close to this asset for a long time. I'd like to know just like the other considerations that we might want to take into account before. I mean, clearly, as the fiscal person, yeah, $250,000, a lot of money for our town. But I don't want to, do this lightly, knowing that like our relationship with the BLM is really important moving forward. So.
Well, that's why I think it would be important for everybody to ask their questions and the person who handles it, the BLM, as well as, certainly I wouldn't imagine moving forward without talking to the manager on it. But I'm not skilled in airport management. It's not something I know a lot about. So even asking questions at the meeting, I'm not sure that I asked the right questions.
I'd like to hear what is the difference between, okay, we drop down to an airstrip and we don't have to have this kind of maintenance, or what is the just necessary safety maintenance to even keep an open strip? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there'd be something that has to be done in the campsite. So, like, what would that look like? And I don't know. Then I'd like to hear what the use is. Like, I mean, it's like airstrip, if the airstrip is still serviceable for the majority of the planes that it, I mean, that's,
And I know Jim Hook has sent over some of that usage information. I'll make sure that's forwarded back out to council. He does get that report in, and as well as like the economic impact or the projected economic impact, which kind of went into some of that appraisal.
What kind of revenues are we looking at using? I mean, we have hangar leases. Do we have anything?
We don't have anything else in the master fee schedule right now. There was like a to be determined, like a tie down fee, but I would say it is not substantial enough to counteract $250,000 in maintenance.
Isn't that like
Quite far from.
I know, like at other airports, a type fee is like $20 a night or something, which is.
Yeah, the discussion that we'd had with the manager before said it's economically not feasible to do a tie down charge because you'd have to run it by credit cards. We'd have to have electricity and hookups and all kinds of other things that just didn't make it feasible. And my recollection of the last annual report on usage was 25 to 30 planes a year. So we're not talking a huge number of planes, even if you charge $100 tie down. We're not going to get anywhere close in a couple of years today. But I do think that it's rather than just putting it on for a vote on the lease, like normally would happen. I thought it was really important to go to a work session and figure out a plan. Is there just a consensus to move forward and deal with it later, or do you want more information?
I would also like to know what kind of economic impact, how many people do we have that are visiting town, and specifically, well, because we have airports that they could fly into it, if they're flying in. We have a few, but I'm just curious as to what that would look like.
Possibly, some of the people may fly into landing because there's more security and they're right from to them.
Well, the ones that I know of are definitely landing it. That's just the ones that I have personal knowledge of, and they're not flying the landing, they're flying the Bluff and everything there. But that doesn't, I'm just curious how many people are in that boat.
And I don't know if Jim keeps track of that piece or not, but I would imagine even if he didn't keep an exact need, he does. So what I'm hearing is people would like to get more information before we put it on for vote.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
The other process, actually.
do you want to have the BLM come in and tell us the differences before we invite Jim Hook, or have Jim Hook come in first and give an opinion and information on what he has?
Might be good to have the BLM come and explain the differences to us, because then we could ask Jim questions based on if we did this, would this impact that?
She might be able to help us find more of that information and that stuff. I'm wondering, like, what's the maintenance?
Well, why don't I see if the BLM can jump onto the first meeting in March? And then we have the work session in next meeting.
Yeah, I would like to see the European use as a local resource somehow, like, as far as the, like, that's an experimental craft festival or something.
Well, we do have, Lucky Martin does bring planes, but I don't know if it's an annual thing.
I know that there was push
But,
planes and the
yeah.
application.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like experimental craft, that's what it seems like a cool place to fly.
Right.
People use the resources for the rest of the money, like past those 30 planes. It's something that might have, do something that would have people stay behind.
Yeah, we did have an off-season festival.
So, I don't know, but
So the next meeting is the 18th.
they can issue out the stuff already.
Yeah, I'll definitely send out to all council members those economic impact units.
And the first meeting in March is March 4th.
Yes.
Any other thoughts on this? Then moving to the next is a review and discussion of the request to vacate one half of an alley adjacent to the Oil Sands RV park. And I think Erin, you sent out the update from Rocky Mountain Power today.
Yes, so, Emily Yaris did forward us, sorry, I have to go through all of your tabs here. Rocky Mountain Power Road, to whom it may concern, Rocky Mountain Power's overhead power lines are not impacted by the southerly alleyway abandonment request made by Michael and Emily Yaris. None exist at this time. And I think that was the final confirmation for utilities that we were looking for. So appreciate getting that in. At this time, we have not received any written public comment regarding the petition to vacate the alley. The information is available on our website, and references that the deadline to submit comments is this Friday at 6 p.m. So February 14th at 6 p.m. And then I believe what we communicated to the RSOs would be the vote. Hopefully we go on for a vote on the 18th.
And we did receive a separate survey on the alley portion to vacate. Or our Yaris is relying solely on the survey that was done for the Tenay property.
So it looks like the one that was submitted in the original application is in reference to the 2A. But I can send a quick confirmation. To Pamela. Yeah, that's the one that is in the packet that we received.
Because I could be wrong, but I thought that we either had or we're expecting a separate one for that, for the piece there.
Yeah, back in December, Pamela writes, we have requested the survey information from Brad Bunker on our property for this as soon as I get them. So I can take the report.
Because the survey sheet that I'm looking at matches the quick claim deed from the county to Honor to me, Cynthia to me. Legal is identical, but the legal would not, or the physical description would not, I would think, be identical to this other part to have a different description. So I think it would be the turtle direction, the north line, the line that's and south line. But it would be the line, there'd be a line that wasn't described in the to me survey, I would think. So would you follow up with them and see
Sure.
what, if they had a separate survey done? And the reason is because if we were to grant vacating that, there has to be a legal that goes into the deed. It gets recorded. And we can't use the TNA structure and description. So I thought it was interesting reading the 3 letters of the utility companies. I can't tell from the Rocky Mountain Power letter whether they have an easement on that section of the alley or not. They just say the overhead power lines are not impacted as none exist at this time.
I know that the overhead power lines that go across my property does have an easement underneath it stating that we can't physically build anything underneath those power lines.
Did
But-
the RSs indicate though that it was on Tumay's property, that the power
I
line was
thought
on the
that's-
north
yeah,
side
I
of
thought
the
that
alley?
that's what Pam said.
Yeah.
Just because you're,
Yeah, I think that's why we were delayed was sorry. This was the last one to come in because they needed, Mr. Tumay to verify that easement essentially on his property. And then they could clear the rest of the alley that it wouldn't be impacted.
And we don't have that yet.
No, that's what this is. I will say in the future, it would be helpful, and again, the Yarsis has been very patient with us as we've gone through this request. But that form letter that we requested be sent out to the utility company, that's what I look back, because that way we can compare everything apples to apples. But, given that we asked them to notify and everything in the future, just that exact template that we provide in the vacation packet should be what the utility companies are sending back to us or back to the applicant to send to us.
And there was the one other piece in our instructions that I wanted us to add to, which was, I think it was not clear that it was the petitioner's responsibility to notify landowners. I can't remember what that language was, but there was one other thing that I thought was vague that we should clear up for the future. I don't think I printed that out. One of the things is that under the resolution that we passed about not routinely vacating alleys and doing things, was a part of the consideration is hardship. And what is the hardship to the owner? Adjacent is asking for it. And initially, I believe the hardship was that that the RSs had already obtained a grant that would require those solar panels kind of being in that general vicinity. But if I recall the statements made correctly by Pamela Yaris at the public hearing, they've already started construction because they re-engineered it with that. And the statement was, they want that. And I guess the question is, hopefully we won't see any more of these where half of it's already been vacated. And we've got a half of an alley. But I do think that that hardship issue is something people should think about. Because if there's no hardship now, does that should we factor that into our analysis and our vote as to whether to vacate? And I'll go back and listen to that, but I'm pretty certain that was the framing.
Give the percent that they start construction, but I did the same thing.
Well, she had talked about when they had originally, they didn't take into account the tipping of the panels somehow, I think. And so they needed less space or some, at least what I thought she is. It's an originally.
Meaning this emphasize things in awkward.
Yeah, and I think this is at least one of three that I know are issues that the county left to us, like doing certain things or not doing certain things. So I'll put it on the agenda for next week. If there's anything anybody wants to follow up on, or do it,
Did we have any public hearing on comments?
and our public comment closes.
Friday, February 14th at 6 p.m. And it is posted on the website. If you intend to mail your public comment, it needs to be to us by Friday. And that way everything is due. Yeah. So, but we accept emails to office@townofbluff.org.
Anybody have any other thoughts or anything you want to follow about? I told some of your party that I was canceling the permit.
Yeah, that's the problem, is it's removing several key players. There's a lot of town businesses being put on hold because of this.
Or maybe if I take care of anybody's animals, I won't return them to that nature.
Yeah, you might not want to say that one. They might say, oh, well, let's be gone. Ann just got 6 new dogs.
And they're already trained. Yay. Anything else on number 2, or we'll move to number 3? Report by Bluff Town Council members on respective strategic planning projects, and then a discussion of the need for succession planning.
I'll start. So we have a playground committee. I'll start with the playground committee. Is in the pursuit of a grant for a playground apparatus or apparatuses for the community center playground. We had last week with a tape measure and went out and marked things and are looking at things. Sarah Burak is applying for a grant through the CPR grant. Yeah. They have a 20% matching that is required with that grant. And the match breaks down to us be half, money match, and then the other half can be in kind or whatever else we would like to match it with. So that's a state grant, so hopefully, I believe it's a state grant anyway, so hopefully it's not in jeopardy with other things, but that looks promising. What we had kind of mapped out in our previous meeting was, looking at a half-court basketball pad and then the playground equipment. When we met last week, we thought that maybe we could split that into a couple of different phases and focus the current phase on the playground equipment. We would move the existing, either abandon or move the existing playground equipment a little bit further to the east, and then save that spot where our existing playground equipment is for the half-court basketball pad sometime in the future. Depending on what fund availability is, we talked about looking at ways that we could possibly incorporate our old tree out there as part of the equipment. And then as we were leaving, we were like, oh, and then there's the other side of the pavilion that maybe we could do some cool things as well, sound garden type things. One of the things that I thought might be fun about that is trying to approach the Utah Arts Council about possible funding, looking at it as a community arts project. You know that when we originally did the sculptures and everything that are currently out there, Janet Simpson was instrumental in those with a kind of vacation after school type program, and the kids actually, constructed those forms that are out there and painted them, and since other people have painted them, but it seems like it could be a fun way to tie in some arts and possibly come up with some more grant money as well. The Utah Arts Council has shifted their in-school programs to more community-based artist in residence programs, so that might be, something that's very achievable for us going after as a community rather than just as a school. So that was fun to get out there and move with that kind of stuff, and we'll continue to follow up on that. But that was towards the improving livability aspect of the strategic plan. As for water board, several of us have been working still with this strategic planning session for Bluff Water Works. I think some things have become a little bit more clear with that in directions that we need to move as a council to approaching Bluff Water Works about finding a solution. So, that's got some progress being made toward it as well. The BCC or the CCC is of course moving, as you all know, and hopefully we had a good meeting with our GoDO grant person today, and in shifting maybe some of the funds to be more usable to pay for architect and upfront spending while we're waiting for things to be unfrozen, so we can continue to move forward with that. So I think we'll make a straight headway with that as well.
Good work.
Well, that's multiple of us, I know, so.
Go team, go.
Yeah.
To the water works out in the URC, and good work over the other day, hosting that big meeting. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's exciting. I met with Barbara Silversmith at the school to talk about some of the traffic information from the UDOT lower the speed limit, and she was able to give me some of it, and she has some questions. So I haven't seen the email yet, so I'll do it. But she's super interested in learning this game. It's very grateful to talk about it. And kind of a side note, just ask for any kind of other side, just any other flashing lights or just anything to make it more safe. What else? I think that was the big third thing I was doing outside of there that you did.
So I'm also working on this Bluff Water Works strategic plan. And I've been doing filing of invoices and other records, so that when we do get a bookkeeper, things will be ready. I mean, they're ready now, but I'm just trying to, make sure everything is where it needs to be.
I don't feel like we've made much progress on anything the last month or two. I have been working, with UDOT to try to figure out the speed study. So Britt and I haven't met yet to hear what Barbara Silversmith had to say. But I do have a fair amount of information in the past that might be helpful to the school because the regulations have not changed on the signage. We did get new signs, if everyone noticed, we did get some signs. But the flashing signs at semaphores or crosswalks, those are pretty much not on the table for Bluff. And if we don't have a plan for the school to be using Bluff River Trail and crossing over, that probably is something that would unfortunately factor against us in the state study. I know they were talking about doing it in the next few months, so it would be helpful if you and I can talk and follow up with UDOT and see if there's anything else that they need. Other than that, I really can't even remember what I have in the strategic plan, so.
We've been working on the emergency services piece. We've been having discussions with the county. Because there's a lot of moving parts there. Really no silver bullet, but Ann and I are able to deal with that. And then got a good start on enforcement. I know that's later on, but definitely an enforcement piece.
Thank you for reminding me of that. I received it's a backing up on the enforcement piece. As we all recognize, it's something that we have and have it in the next category to talk about, but the enforcement, I've received a number of phone calls over the past 3 months complaining, I shouldn't say complaining, asking for enforcement on dogs at large. And so I've gone back to pulling out my old information to work on it, which really requires the enforcement piece. So last week, Erin and I were at the San Juan County Commission meeting. I asked the current sheriff, if he would meet with me to talk about specifically enforcement and what we might be able to do. I also talked to a community member who is familiar with enforcement and has done enforcement with that as an officer, kind of talking about like, where are we sitting and what can we do to move this along in a process. So yeah, thanks for raising that. The other piece is the ties to the speed study idea is the Jake braking. I'm trying to work on a Jake brake draft to get our attorney to say, yes, this is a good ordinance. We can use this because that is required to have the signs actually sanctified by San Juan County. But I would like to talk to the sheriff while I'm doing this to make sure that the deputies and the sheriff and I are all on the same page about what we will not be able to enforce. Because as you'll see on this next piece, number 4, talking about enforcement communities. So, anything else to report on strategic?
Do you have any evidence in the EMS? Stuff on EMS, on those conversations?
There's going to be another meeting later this spring. So for EMS, there are a lot of moving parts. The new director is going to get a little bit more, I'll say more into the weeds in a good way in terms of how each responding entity, like how many runs that they're doing, and if the county was to try to implement a contract that would ask the town to reimburse a portion of the expenses every year, we would want to make sure that those calculations are really accurate, because what was presented 6-7 months ago, was just found to have some holes in it. And so they're gonna kind of be breaking it down that way. But the county and other municipalities have said that they're, like, we're all willing to come together to really talk about it and try to figure out how to fix it. And then we've also, Ann was able to speak with some folks at the county to try to mend some of the relationships to get some of our qualified folks who maybe were EMSs in the past back onto the EMS group, which would be really helpful.
I will say that Lori Mon, the new commissioner, really has a lot of energy. She's asking a lot of questions, and she's asking the hard questions. So I'm really appreciative of the work that she started off doing right off the bat. And Commissioner Stubbs was doing a really good job too. Jamie Carter was doing a good job. So I think, given the interest the three of them are showing in getting correct data to us, and between Erin and the other two managers, brain cells on numbers, because they're the ones that really formulating these numbers were totally off. And I think one example was staff was never instructed exactly how to fill out certain parts of the data. So for instance, Bluff would get charged for runs that aren't within Bluff. And so if it was outside Monticello city limits, they were getting charged for things. So the data is really off. And I think we all at that meeting were committed to another meeting in April, and I talked with one of our EMS and said, you know, it's in your best interest to show up. It's a work session. They want input. This commission is really interested in input, and yes, writing letters is great and it's gotten their attention, but there's nothing like the physical bodies in the room saying that the room to collectively fix it. So it doesn't, it's not helpful to have the mantra, and I'm sorry, Salem County, it's not helpful to say good road. That's not going to save a life or put out a fire or doing saying good road. So I feel like there's some commitment right now to move it forward and get off that mantra. Erin did a great job. She's really good with words.
I just want to make sure the other thing, like if we're talking about if the town is going to need to spend money in our budget, that our first responders have the tools and resources they need to do their job adequately. And through no fault of their own, you're kind of be giving like secondhand, even lower supplies. And so that's something I'm bringing up a lot, is that if we are, and who knows, but if we're going to have to contribute, that we're treated equitably to the other municipalities. And so that would mean the equipment they're using, the vehicles, and regular service. I know it seems like the services, like the servicing of vehicles has been better and things like that. But, you know, we just want to make sure that, you know, if anything, this kind of gets our foot in the door a little bit to make sure our folks have what they need to do the job.
All right, then. Number 4, review and discussion of the chart of Bluff municipal codes and possible revision, framework for enforcement remedies, and a discussion of Utah state laws for nuisances. So I had said I tried to put a chart together, and I did. And it's pretty rudimentary, but it does walk through the ordinances that we've passed that are relevant to enforcement. I left off things like, and thank you to Malia, she put the initial chart together for me. But I removed the things like approval of our Bluff meetings for dates for 2025. You know, so I took out things that were not enforcement. And then gave the name of the ordinance, what the purpose is, what remedies are within that ordinance. Then specifically in the column that's EMI, which was interesting. obviously from BMC, but, if you look at aviation facilities ordinance, first one, just by example, the remedy is, use the remedies in BMC 6.80.10. Okay. Now, what was BMC? So we didn't have a reference to, this is Bluff Municipal Code. So Malia put it, instead of having it stuck in the body of this, put it at the head of all ordinances. Go to our website, search your title under the tab, whatever, and then people know to look where, and then we should reference what BMC is. Do some kind of footnote that BMC is what's municipal code, because most people are not going to want to. The person who doesn't have a lot of time or desire is not going to want to go to 2020-5-10, see BMC 6.80.10, go to 6. It's convoluted. And so when I got done looking at this, one of my suggestions, I met with Amanda Podmore yesterday, was the RV ordinance has gone to our attorney. There's another ordinance that's going to have to go. And I'll get to that in a minute. And then the animal ordinance, the dog and cat ordinance that I'm thinking of presenting to all of you, that will go into one public hearing, or the two that have a public hearing. But from now on, the remedy should be spelled out within that ordinance. So no reference to a previous ordinance, spell it out, because people shouldn't have to try to find the remedy. And so when we get that RV ordinance back, rather than a generic remedy, but the remedies seem to be very much categorized as injunctive relief, some form of money damages, withholding future permits, or future permits if you're in violation, withholding a certificate of occupancy, and we have a few that have civil penalties of $1 amount for violations. So I'd like to spend some time cleaning some of this up, and then having us do a work session with planning and zoning to say, is there something here that we should get back to planning and zoning to look at? We have a whole. But I think it would be helpful for us to know where the holes are. So sticking with the holes, there was the ordinance that was on our website for off-street parking. So because I don't do well reading on a computer for hours, I had printed out the ordinances and I was going through them. I asked Erin yesterday or the day before to pull the off-street parking ordinance because I don't believe we ever passed it. If we did pass it, it's an embarrassment as to the cleanup that was not done. So it's pulled off. I couldn't find anything that said we'd ever passed it. And what was obvious to me is when you look at the number for the ordinance, it was X.10, X.20, and it just doesn't make any sense. So that's one that I'll probably send out for everyone to take a look at, and then send that to Chris Rose of the RV ordinance. In part because the RV ordinance dovetails into the street parking, and we can't have contradictory ordinances. So if we did pass it and we have contradictions, we need to clean it up. So I think that's kind of the explanation of where we are. If you want more detail on the chart, you can ask me for it, but don't ask me to amend the chart until we have a staff person that can really do a chart. I'm not, I'm just not equipped to do charts. Thoughts, questions?
I like this.
I agree that, we should have to have some rule and things like that before a lot of time gets spent. Right. Behind each other. And, I hope that the town is converted, that planning and zoning commission is taking into account the enforcement possibilities and how to work on that with upcoming board, and as they're considering their new planning and zoning member, hopefully they will put an emphasis on that, because I think that's an important piece. I think we've got to quit writing ordinances that we can't enforce otherwise.
Yeah,
It's just gonna set a bad precedence.
yeah, I think that, in my conversation privately with Kendall Laws, the former county attorney for San Juan, and in his public comment, the zoning, the last conversation, if you're going to write an ordinance, you need to know why you're writing it, kind of what the purpose is and how your enforcement is going to go, and are you accomplishing what you're passing? This is something you can do. And I feel like we've done a good job meeting those criteria, because most of these ordinances have been big legislative requirements that we've had to do, discretionary ones, like looking again at the animal piece. Like, how detailed do we want to be? How far in the weeds do we want to go? Because when planning and zoning passed out the animal ordinance draft, it had a lot of detail in it that there's no way we could enforce some of these things. That it would just have been impossible. So when I met with Amanda yesterday, we talked about enforcement, and particularly we talked about the building inspections, which is down in the next one. But sticking with number 4, I looked at the Utah state law for nuisances. So when we're going through the ordinances, particularly in the future, I'll get a copy of some summary of what the nuisance law says, but quite a few of the situations that come to my attention can be handled by the private landowner using the state law without involving us in writing a specific ordinance or addressing that issue. And so I thought that's something we should look at. And maybe in the next public hearing, we have to do a brief presentation on how you as a complainant can take care of this yourself by filing a complaint directly against that adjacent landowner or the annoying barking dog or whatever. But I think I had not really paid attention to the state nuisance law, and I did some pretty detailed reading last week or 2 about it. And I think some public education would be really valuable. Because quite honestly, while I appreciate the position and the full elected nature, it is not what I want to hear someone screaming obscenities into my private phone. And if I can direct somebody to a specific spot, say, I appreciate your concern. This is what we have done to address it. And here's where you can go. You can go to address it. Where I can go along with for the next round of people taking these seats. So, if there's anything on the enforcement piece you want me to explore specifically, other than building codes and the building inspections, and we'll get to that.
Did you find that if there were fees or monetary penalization, are they kind of all in the same vein? Were there any that like really fell outside of like the average? Was it even like a commonly used enforcement mechanism?
It appeared to be hit and miss enforcement, and some of it felt like it would, like we took them out of somebody else's ordinances that really didn't fit for the importance within law. Like it didn't really impact safety. Something else got a little bigger bump of fun. fine safety. And if we're going to have like $300 for a violation of a building code, well, then you write the citation and you go through and just how we collect it. And so it's a big piece. And if we start with the baby steps of looking at enforcement, like what have we got right now? Because we don't have 300 ordinances. What do we have? What do we want to fix or not fix? And then what do we want to get for direction in the future? I do like the idea that was thrown out in various emails and discussions with building permits. Like San Juan County can double the cost of the building permit if you don't have a building permit when you get your building permit. Plus there's another added filing fee for getting your building permit, fee for getting your permit. So I like those ideas, but those are on San Juan County. We don't need them now since we don't issue the permit, but it might be something that we look at. Like if you don't come to the town for a land use clearance, this is what's going to happen when you do get there, when it's been planned out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
because I mean, it really does increase our work if we have to go and find folks and notify them, and beg them to come. I mean, it's not like, oh, I'm just putting in my application now. Like, there is a lot of extra work that goes into it.
I think we do want to keep into account what Chris did say to us, though the ultimate goal is to get people to comply with
Yeah.
our ordinances. So we don't want to make them.
Yeah, don't want it to be so burdensome that
Exactly.
they don't comply.
Exactly.
But I do also
But
think
it's stiff
that,
enough
like,
that we want them to. pay
yeah,
attention.
there has to be motivation to comply.
Yep.
When you were looking at the monetary, did all of them tie to our master fee schedule, or is that something that we're gonna need to update as well?
that is a good question. If it's a penalty, it would tie to the master fee schedule, but it's probably, I will go through and take a look and see if any of them are. And it probably would behoove us to have that clear. That so you pay $300 to get your building permit at San Juan County, but that isn't reflected in here. You're getting penalized. And I think probably again back to public information. Should we do an educational piece? But Erin, that's a good point. I'll go through and take a look at that. And thank you, Malia, for doing the chart. I realized that if I go into the chart, I managed to delete columns and whatever. And that kind of, I realized in number 3, we didn't talk about the succession planning. Erin sent out, sent me an email about this website that has succession planning. That if we could send that out again to everybody and take a look at that. So the next time we're back into talking about structure, we've looked at this. I did talk to Pathways. They have done some succession planning, but it is something if we want to do some specific planning, we might want to think about sending it out for an RFP of some kind to see if we can get some interested.
The Women's Business Center of Utah is doing some specific succession training, which I don't know that we could, take advantage of that training through them, and it might be more business oriented, but if they had somebody specifically that they were to present, maybe it would be worth approaching those people. Interesting. I think that's coming up in one of the classes that I'm currently taking, so I'll try to pay attention to that person.
Anything else on numbers 3 or 4? The number 5, the discussion of San Juan County Commission work sessions and meetings, changes to San Juan County and the Town of Bluff's building inspections. So we touched on the EMS piece from the work session last week, that there's another session. And it's not on there, if I remember correctly, it's not on there the usual date that they have it out for the month. They moved it because there were conflicts with folks.
So I do think it's in April,
I
right?
was thinking it's like April 14th or 15th, maybe April 15th tax filing day.
Yes, April 15th. Probably 9 a.m. is the work session time.
So again, if interested people want to see, they can either come up there or weigh in virtually to that work session in April. But it will be, a large portion of it will be directed toward EMS. And eventually, I imagine the players going to move there as well. But I think keeping this moving is good. One of the things that has happened is, you might recall, the building inspector for San Luis County interviewed and was hired by the San Luis County Sheriff's Department. So he is now a deputy in training. So the draft agreement that we received, that the town was announced to Chris McEnany, he read mine and sent back. And I sent back to the head of planning and zoning department for the county. We've never gone back to it because it kind of became a moot point. So last week, the commission was presented with so the commission, just to give you some quick background, what Erin is doing for us now, putting together a packet, the commission does. And their packet last Tuesday was 300 plus pages. And so in the course of one or two people in Bluff not getting appropriate building permits and having some problems with their building when the inspections were done, it kind of led to San Juan County like taking a hard look at, are we going to do contracts with municipalities to have building inspections? How are we going to do it? So the county attorney took a stab at writing what he called a contract between the now deputy / building inspector and another person. So two people would be hired on a contract, and we would continue to do business pretty much like we have been doing. We'd send people through the LUC process, or if they didn't need that up to San Juan County, they'd get their permit. They would pay the fee. We found out in the meeting that we were at that San Juan County also contracts with Jones and DeMille for building inspections. And the county attorney did not present the contracts to the commission. He emailed them to the commission around 11:15 a.m. the day of the commission meeting. We were already in the meeting. There was just the agenda item that said there was going to be a discussion of a contract between these two individuals and county for building inspections. And just paraphrasing the county attorney's words, that these were draft contracts and they were not his best work. So the contracts did not get approved in terms of those specific contracts. So right now, San Juan County will be using, I imagine, they'll be using Jones and DeMille, which means anybody that we send up or vote to get a building permit will use Jones and DeMille. But the idea that we would be discussing and fine tuning the agreement that was initially provided to us is off the table. So we need to have a discussion, like, is there something we should be doing under the state you have X number of days, I think it's 3, when somebody demands an inspection to get the inspection. And if that doesn't happen, then some of you are more familiar with this than I, then the person who needs the inspection can go outside to find their inspector and use that, which doesn't always bode well for following your community's guidelines. So Erin and I were up there. It was interesting.
I think we might want to explore, I mean, we certainly would have, there would be a lot to bring in a building department or building inspections like into town. But if the county doesn't have a concrete path forward, either looking at our own contract with Jensen or Caden, who's the city manager in Monticello, indicated that he has a contact with someone in Grand County to come down to, and that's who they were potentially thinking about. Because Monticello is in the same situation that we are. It sounds like Blanding has their own.
So who's blending in for that?
I
Is it
think they
Brett
have,
Butler?
I think they might have an internal person.
They do, it's
Is it a hostler?
yeah, it's Hassler.
So they have their own internal, but Monticello and us are kind of in the same boat. And so, you know, it's certainly something that like, we kind of want to watch what the county's doing, but we don't want to wait too long.
Right.
I think it's also pertinent to recognize that, you know, the sheriff does have a full-time job and that 3-day deadline is pretty important. So, you know, if we, and it could also mean that, you know, we are taking on more responsibilities. Our planning and zoning commission has really stepped up in terms of like trying to communicate with the county and understand what is and isn't happening with certain development projects. But I could see, I think there are pros and cons. Like, it definitely could be beneficial because we would have a full view of exactly what's going on. Whereas, you know, up until the last couple months, it kind of was, well, did they get an LEC? Do they just already have their building permit? What's going on? And I think it's important to recognize too that no matter what, you know, the relationship with the county, we should continue to work on that. But there would be benefits to bringing more under our purview, but it's just going to be more expensive. A lot of those costs do just go directly to the land developer because like they're the ones who are paying for the building permit, but it doesn't mean that we would get rid of all the administration that happens with it. There would still be more administration that would fall to the town.
Does it make sense for us to possibly contract with more than one? So
I know,
you have a choice of 3 and whoever's.
Yeah, so in my research earlier this week, we have 3 licensed, fully equipped building inspectors. Brett Hassler, Scott Burton, and Ben Tomko. And they are the ones that are fully equipped to be able to enter into contracts. And then there's Jones and DeMille. But I think given the response by San Juan County, and it's true, we should be boots on the ground because we're here and we see it. But we're not building inspectors, and then we don't have people who are doing building inspections, and we're at this hiatus where I'm not a builder, but my guess is we're reaching a time in the weather where building might be good and people are going to build. So, and actually given the amount of work that San Juan County is doing right now to look at their zoning that they proposed that the commission didn't accept, and the fact that they're getting public outcry and rewriting the general plan to conform with their proposed zoning and land management stuff. I'm not sure building inspections are going to rise to the top at this point. So, Erin, were you able to talk with Kata?
I had a message out to him, but I haven't yet heard back. But in his defense, I only messaged him yesterday. So
It's not like there's not other stuff going on. But I did want to make sure that everyone understood the agreement that we circulated, that Chris redlined, that got sent back is on the table right now, and probably is bad. Then if there's, and you know, certainly people have some thoughts on how to do this right now, because there's been some public, justifiable public questions about various projects going on in town. I've reached out this week to a couple of project landowners to say, hey, did you do this? Have you done this? Do you need to do this? These are the criteria where you have to take some action. So right now we'll be more or less doing the eyes on the project to say, make sure you get a land use clearance if you need it, make sure you get a building permit. We're going to have to start making sure these requirements are met. And there may be that there is a project or two that gets pretty widely talked about because they're just not in compliance. So moving to number 6, a discussion regarding, okay, I can say EECBG projects causing fund, project fund costs through federal administration. And so Maria and Erin, I'm not sure what the EECBG acronym is. So
Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant. So that is our grant for the Utah Office of Energy Development. And actually, I was on a call with them today, and they said that they have some insider information that they do not believe that project is going to be on pause for much longer. So they'll be reaching out to us soon, and I'm continuing to communicate with Rocky Mountain Power to make sure that we get our energy audits.
And that affects both buildings.
Correct, because that is our grant that we received for the light fixtures in this building, and then for insulation and something else. I think light fixtures there too.
That was the bigger of the two, is the CCC.
Yes.
And it's a substantial.
And I also received an email from the EPA today that we have received a new project officer, and I've scheduled a meeting with her on Thursday. So we're hoping to get that unfrozen, thawed out. So that we can keep on moving with that. So that'll be our February check-in meeting. So I'll have to update on that better.
and you set that for this Thursday.
I did.
Not when you're on the river.
Well, I thought about doing that to you guys, but you know, instead I'm just gonna pack this week.
So there was an article that really looked as though, I mean, it was a good news article when it's reliable, saying that that kind of center track of clean out on the EPA employees going to happen, but hopefully that's not. Hopefully there's not going to be a widespread firing or laying off people. So I'm glad to hear that there's a person assigned.
I'm really confident that they're crafting their reduction in force. Or basically they're down to what's legally legal. And then they're supposed to be what I've heard, using one person go. If more people go, then the person will be hired for this. So
Kind of like Bluff.
So, but, you know, I mean, we've been hearing all kinds of rumors stuff from Salt Lake, and, you know, I mean, I know it's in there, but don't play, they have tons of projects going on up there, so we've heard that there's pushback to it, but you're gonna see visible pushback in here, so.
Yeah, I think at least regardless of how we individually, personally feel, what we have to do is we're gonna make everything work that we can and keep applying for funding and moving stuff around and, I think that's all we can do. Because we sure, it's been an interesting couple of weeks for everybody.
Well, I think today's meeting that we had with the GOEO rep is very positive in, I mean, ways of hopefully making it happen, although certainly the GOEO grant can't cover the $1 million that we're looking at with the other one. But, I mean, and she was very understanding and saying, you're not the only ones. And they want to see projects be successful as well, I think. So I thought that was good that there's at least some understanding. Yes, maybe it'll take us a little longer, but.
And so for people listening, GOEO is,
Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity.
and then the other piece that, I don't know which meeting was at, was thrown out the USDA and the United States Department of Agriculture hasn't frozen a lot of their stuff. So our fire suppression materials may still be viable. But I think that I really appreciate all the work that's being done to talk to the different grants and see where money can be reallocated so they can keep moving forward. Along those lines of kind of trying to move forward, I met with Janet Sloman last Thursday for an hour to discuss progress between our partnerships on the CCC, and I have another meeting scheduled with her on the 25th of this month to talk about what our partnership looks like and how feasible things are with what we're seeing. And it was a pretty candid conversation on both sides. But if some progress is made in communicating, I felt, and I think she did too. So we're going to continue that on the 25th. So stay tuned on that front.
One more thing while we're still on number 6, Erin, were you able to access our ASAP, please?
No, I'm trying to check today, but I can definitely check this week.
And I do have I signed up for a webinar tomorrow for a little bit of information on where those federal grants are, so to be continued in March.
Just keep going back to the comment that I heard somebody speak, and I can't remember what vein it was in, but that there is not a project out there that they've ever been associated with that goes smoothly. It doesn't have any hiccups. So I'm just crossing my fingers that this is just our portion of it. Just feel like we get things rolling, and then all of a sudden there's something else thrown in.
Mainly I say water, like the way I keep talking to my team about it, it's like all we do is super board and best decisions are made in the middle of a constitutional crisis.
Right.
It seems like so.
Yeah.
Good work.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is we just throw in the towel and shut down, and that is not what happened. So, but also I think everybody needs to remember we're doing a lot of work, and it's good to take breaks and time off and take care of yourself. That is going to be really important, because this is, what's that? This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We are in it for the long haul. So nothing's going to be resolved tomorrow. That's not new results.
Well, especially when there's, especially when it's completely out of your hands. Sometimes you just have to give it up and move forward to what you can do.
We could start a betting pool on like what email is going to come in today. The likelihood of an email from so-and-so telling us this. I put on here for number 7, a review and discussion of the changes to the code of conduct and rules of procedure. I was hoping to maybe find time to actually look at them myself, and I didn't, so I'm going to be honest, but I haven't looked at them other than knowing that we've incorporated in 2018, these were from 2018, so I think it's time to go through them. And
Is there anything in that on my end? I could probably do it, or just
well, one thing that didn't get, we never really, I don't think anybody did. The transition of in-person meetings in 2018 to moving to electronic meetings in 2020. You know, we have a resolution we did all the steps we needed to do legally to be virtual. But I think it's worth looking at how are public hearings conducted? Are there more things we feel should be where the body is in the building versus you can have virtual viewers or participants, but the governing body is here. Planning and zoning is still pretty much meeting 100% virtually. And I don't know how it conflicts or doesn't conflict with what we wrote. And so, and it's not crucial. I mean, it's not, there's nothing in there that needs to be immediately addressed, but there was, now that you say that, how this came up was a news source that I get for legislative changes, Open and Public Meetings Act. Where is this? There was something that we routinely did that was required when we incorporated it in our procedures, but it's no longer required. I'll find it and send it out to everyone, but it's, you know, going through and just checking the current Open Public Meetings Act is what we do.
And this is a good time too, because we are asking planning and zoning to take a look at their bylaws. And so, you know, seeing what they write, and we can kind of have some similarities.
Yeah, I think it's just like Erin said, it's a good time to do it, but it's not like the most pressing issue, but it is something. It's kind of like reviewing our general plan. We really should be reviewing our general plan every couple of years, and we haven't. And especially as we're making changes, we should be reviewing the general plan. So
I was just going to say too, you know, given with a few members of the council that have terms ending, we have a few members of council whose terms are continuing. I think this is a good one for the council members who are continuing on to take a look at, to ensure that you will fully understand what's written in there. And if you do see the need for changes that would help with the organizational effectiveness, and just, you know, for anyone else wanting to run for council, it would make sense to include X, Y, and Z. Now would be a great time to do it before we do get caught up in elections results. So.
yeah, and elections will be upon us very soon. June is the time period for declaring, so we'll have sort of a roadmap as to who's out there. And before we go to community impact work, one thing about the enforcement, Jen, that you said that I meant to respond to, is I think in looking at planning and zoning and how they're structuring and making recommendations for the next planning commission, I think really what you said was very important. Enforcement is such a huge piece. The experience with enforcement, any knowledge of enforcement, any of that would be extremely beneficial, because that seems to be our sticking point on both for the council and the commissioners. It's like, how do we enforce this? And it is where Erin and I probably see the most public comments, like, oh, the lights in my window and somebody's dog is on my property pooping and, you know, whatever. And so thanks for raising that. I really appreciate it. So if you don't have them there on our website, so you can take a look at them, you probably, did you send them in the packet?
Well, we just had the question, I think it kind of pertains to this, in that whether we should let somebody's note taker in as opposed to.
Mm-hmm.
That was,
Yeah.
don't know.
Seems
What
like,
did it
yes,
say?
seems like, yeah.
And another piece that planning and zoning and I have not agreed on is you have to accept and this is based on our attorney's advice, anonymous comment. You cannot not take it. You can give it the weight it's entitled to. But I keep seeing popping up in planning and zoning minutes like that, you know, we're not going to take this way. You do, you have to take. And I think it's a good point for all of us to review those things. And then if we need to get any additional training, I'm hoping that each local government continues their training program, but I've been remiss in getting a hold of Stag to ask them, but I haven't seen anything come across my computer that says they're discontinuing with their training, so.
And they just solicit something that they were having. And maybe not.
I send out frequent ones. But that is a good reminder though. Code of conduct meetings and such, make sure you're sending your OPMA training to Linda. If you have not yet completed yours. Let me know if you need that link.
Yes.
I think,
Or if you said they just said it.
I'll put it at the top of your inbox, don't you worry.
I think it took me literally 6 minutes to do.
That's like
Yeah.
a two of us, I know.
No, you're fine. I think we're missing some from planning and zoning too, so I'll just.
Condition one, let's see, rental account sold to third party.
I'll just-
That doesn't sound right.
I'll just, maybe I'll bring forward to everyone and say, this doesn't apply to you, please ignore it.
Maybe that was the one that I had to take for, is that the same one that I had to take for TTAB too? Okay, for both.
I'll do it.
That's
It was only 6 minutes.
honestly, like the longest part is like trying to get the login to their site.
Yes,
So,
that's
yeah.
exactly it. It's like, I think it's fine, so just do it.
So the last thing is discussion of community impact board list. So the person who's with CERTA, which was Sulog, and CIB, they're updating the list, and he is coming to Bluff March 18th, I think it is.
That sounds right, but it's moved.
Yes, it's moved. And so, if, you know, if no one remembers what's on the CIB list or the CASI inventory list, we can send that out again. But one of the points I'd like to make is when we applied for CIB funds in 2020 or 2019, there was resistance to us for the purpose of funding CCC, the Cooperative Cultural Center, based on less perceived opposition to extractive industry. And I think, you know, we're several years past that. We haven't had issues arising. I would like to think I have established a reasonable relationship with Bruce Adams, who's now in CIB, but still is definitely a game player. I think we should look at our list and move some of these things around. And one is really the backhaul idea. Like we could release the backhaul and might be needing an ambulance. So I think that we should be looking at our list and talking representative about, should we actually make a request to the CIB rather than just being on the list? Because then they rank, you probably all know this, they rank the municipality requests and entity requests into them. And a position and the bigger the need, like asking for a car to drive Linda around, just couldn't get a low rating, but asking for an ambulance might get us a push up the list.
Well, especially since our ambulance is used for not only town things, but.
And particularly, I think, an interesting time to be looking at the list because I'm trying to get some traction on the cemetery issue, and we've got the EMS and fire issues out there. So we do have some, and it would be nice to have some heavy equipment for the town so that we don't have to pay equipment rental to some of these projects.
Can you remind me, does CIB require a public hearing as to what goes on the list? And if so, do we need to like meet any of that before we meet with this gentleman?
My recollection is there is no requirement, but I will double check that. That's a good question. And it actually isn't a bad idea to have it on an agenda and to take some public comment, see what people think are important, but we can't rely on private individuals to provide their equipment forever. I mean, some of us were going, we should get on this. And maybe make an ask. We don't know what I really couldn't say what the reaction would be if they actually asked for something now.
The only caution that I throw out there is in particular with backhoe, I think it's less of an issue with an ambulance is if we get a backhoe, then where do we store it?
Where do we store it?
Who do we
Who
maintain
operates
it?
it?
Who
Who
operates it?
operates it?
Oh, yeah, there's a whole list of the whole things that go along
Money,
with it.
yeah.
Exactly. To go into consideration with that.
Yeah. We should. Yeah,
Because we're not gonna house a backhoe next to the garden shed out here.
I think it would fit here. I think we'll be fine. No, it's inside. No,
We have to
there's,
go to the ambulance garage though.
yeah, there's a whole cash feasibility. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes with it.
But it would be really helpful given kind of where we're sitting and kind of the big stuff that we have to deal with, so.
Or we could house it in the garage mahal. That would force me to clean out a lot of that stuff for order. Could look nice as could store it in the back of someone's restaurant and have it be a toy for kids to climb on.
I hear insurance companies hate that kind of thing. Oh gosh, but no, I mean, I think it's been on the list for a couple years now.
I think, I think that there's more, we get a piece of equipment like that, we also need to look at, can we get a mower attachment that goes along with it that we could put on the front and both sides of our roads, I mean, things like that,
Yeah, so I think I'll dig out the date that he's coming and I'm pretty sure it's March 18th right now, at 1 o'clock. But then if people want to actually participate, let you know the search of the office, or at least those people are interested. Anything else? It is 5:36.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. 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 Then I'm turning off the recorder and thank you.